My name is Corey Pitzer, and with me today I have Mike Byrne, person you see on the screen. This is one of my what I call fireside chats, and what I do with these fireside chats is to talk to people that have had special experiences in life, in safety, especially in the field of safety, and people who live near the edge and understand what risk, understand what dangers are all about. Now, let me just give you a little bit of a rundown of who Mike Byrne is. Mike currently is an independent consultant in the areas of risk, health, and safety, and has had extensive experience, and I mean extensive, as a safety professional in the mining industry, 20 years plus. And for the last 10 years before he retired, he held the global position of Vice President for Health, Safety, and Operational Risk and Security for what is probably now the largest or close to the largest gold mining company in the world, Newmont Mining Corporation. Now, you don't get into those kind of positions if you don't know your stuff. And Mike is one of those people that I met many years ago and realized he knows his stuff. And more recently, him and I worked together on a global fatality prevention task force for a mining corporation. And it was an eye-opening experience for me and for Mike in terms of what happens in organizations in terms of fatal risk exposures. Now, Mike was also, and this is what today's topic is about, prior to become a safety professional, Mike served as a search and rescue specialist with the Canadian military. Now, we're going to have a talk about what it means to be a search and rescue specialist. Mike also has degrees in health and safety, executive leadership training at Curtin University, and a lot of qualifications. But what I want to talk to Mike today about is the specific area of search and rescue and what that means. Because not many people know about what these people are doing and what sacrifices they're willing to make to ensure that people are rescued out there in doing whatever activities they do. And Mike, can you just give us a little background around what these words mean that others may live in this environment, in this organization? Tell us in depth what this organization is about.
All right. Well, thanks very much, Corey, for this opportunity to catch up with you, of course. It's always great. Yeah, so this organization in the Canadian military was actually formed in 1944 during the war. And it was formed from an individual called Wat May. And he said, look, when we put people in danger, in front of danger, we need to be able to rescue them. So they formed a small team of people, and they needed them to be medics, and they had to have the ability to perform special tasks like parachuting and several other on-the-ground type of environments. Until today, there's been around 700 people that have actually graduated from the program. So 700 people since 1944. Right now, today, there's a little over 100 search and rescues specialists in Canada. And we cover in the vicinity of 10 million square kilometers of area. And that's all terrain. So that's mountains and oceans, forests. With the primary skills, of course, they've advanced since 1944, is that you would have a team of 2 people, and all the rescue specialists would have these skills. They would be mountain rescue, glacier rescue, underwater rescue, and to be able to enter into crash sites or looking for people through parachuting, hoisting, and a combination of rappelling out of helicopters, and a multitude of gear. And so you'd have to have that equipment with you all the time, and you have a lot of currencies to be skilled at it. So that's kind of a brief overview of what pararescue is about. We have advanced medical training. We would be the only medical professionals in Canada certified by the Surgeon General of Canada to be able to perform advanced medical skills in trauma repair and stabilization and extrication across Canada. So having said that, and there's a multitude of 5 different operations across Canada that cover these 10 million square kilometers. And then there's several search and rescue centers that are, one is in Halifax and one's in Ontario and British Columbia. And these centers would then, once an airplane or a marine signal comes up, whether it's communications or a signaling device of some site through the satellites, they would then launch a rescue team.
You look at the statement there, that others may live.
Yeah.
That means people are willing to sacrifice themselves that others may live. Because when you talk about glaciers and mountains and forests and going into crash sites, this is at the edge of risk. One small mistake and you'll be killed.
That's right.
How many people roughly have lost their lives during these operations?
Well, of the time I was in, we had, and just shortly after that, we had nine people had lost their lives in the performance of the rescue. In fact, one of the guys that I had under my wing as a trainee, and he was in the trade, of course, for 3 years. He's fully operational. His name is Phil Young, and we were on a rescue mission just prior to myself retiring. And it was an area of Bellacoola in British Columbia in the mountains. So our rescue helicopter had crashed.
That could have been a mission that you could have been on?
It was the mission I was on.
And then he perished in that.
Yeah, that's right. So the thing with the search and rescue is that at any time, any one of us, the rescue specialist, can be killed, or the whole crew, for that matter. Yeah.
It takes amazing courage to do this, and I think you'll probably say no, it's not courageous, but it is courageous. But the courage, I think, is bolstered by the fact that you know what you're doing and you've been highly trained. You're extremely competent for that job. Is that a true statement or not?
Yes, that's a true statement. And the military does a great job. It's first of all, one of the reasons why there was only 700 people graduated the program, because it's one of the most challenging programs that the Canadian military actually run people through. They have an annual selection process of where people can apply, which is what I did, coming out of the Army. And in your application, they get about 300 people who meet the criteria to apply. Very rigid application process. And if you meet the criteria, then you can go into a selection process. And generally, they'll get about 300 people a year. So these are qualified people, competent people. And by the time they select them out, they're down to about 20. Once they have the 20, they bring them to the training school, and they run them through a program for 30 days in the field, which is quite brutal. And that selects out to see whether there's going to be anybody left to go on the course. And then when they do that, then they'll opt out. A few people will opt out, and others won't be brought back in. And then you go on your training, your physical technical training, which covers all the aspects of search and rescue. So it's a very extensive, hard pushing, but a highly skilled training program.
To me, this is this wonderful equation that in order to save lives, you take extreme risks and you may die so that others can live. Tell me a little bit about this picture. What is the background to this?
Yeah.
And a few comments about some of these. These are extreme activities. That's depicted there, hoisting and from abseiling and parachuting. This is your day job.
That's your day job. You get well, first of all, I think what's important to remember here is when you do a rescue mission, it's because people are in trouble, and they seldom ever get in trouble on a nice day. So it's normally significant winds, rains, nighttime, anything that Mother Nature can throw at you, it's happening that day or night. And your missions can go for days and weeks. You can be called on a mission today, go out on a mission, and because of the size of the search areas and the rescue areas, it's not uncommon to do another 1 or 2 or possibly 3 more rescues on your way home. So there's no, as we say, there's no rest for the wicked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. People, you have to just be ready all the time.
All the time. You've got to be sharp. You've got to be working as a team. And to come back to the motto that others may live, is we live that. And that based on your risk, when you're talking about risk, Corey, It really has to do with, we evaluate as much risk as we possibly can, and then we have to tolerate or accept whatever risk we think is possible that we can, and we are on the very edge of making that decision all the time.
Which is very, very far away from what other people would make a decision about. They wouldn't even dare going near that. And yet you make decisions right on the cliff all the time, all the time. And to me, this is such a privilege to actually met up with you and having a discussions with you about this concept, because as you know, in our field, we define this safety as the readiness to respond to risk.
Right.
And it's about that competency, that skill, that it is more than that. It is also, you have to have a capacity to absorb and tolerate risk that very few people have, which puts your whole career, your whole job, like so far away from what people really understand. And that's why I wanted to have this chat, so people can have a bit of an insight into what it means. And so I also want to ask you to talk a bit about this picture. This to me is a fascinating picture of, you know, what can go wrong here and how you have to deal with this situation. And you've been in that situation. What happens here?
This is, to believe it, it's on the extreme of exposure, but it's not an uncommon day. So this particular picture, the story, I can tell you about the operation, but the particular picture had to do with that I used at one time in a talk. I was asked to go to Australia, give a speech to about 300 underground miners, and they were operating from several mines in Kalgoorlie, Western Australia. And so they're in the theater, about 300 of them. And when I was asked to talk about risk to these guys, and prior to my presentation, this guy says, so you're going to talk to 300 people, underground miners, about risk. And have you ever worked in an underground mine? No. Have you ever been in an underground mine? I said, no. He said, they're going to eat you alive. They're just going to eat you alive.
I know underground miners, they will eat you alive.
Yeah. So I said, yeah, that's okay. You know, I said, look, I've only got one, and I added another slide, which is I took a picture of them all, 300 of them. I'll put that in a slide. So I've got 30 minutes to talk. So I thought, well, you know, I can do 5 minutes, and then they can ask me questions, and then hopefully I get out of there alive without them embarrassing me. So I wasn't concerned about them. So
what did you tell them?
Well, I said to them, look, I said, I'm from Canada. I've never worked in an underground mine before, and I've been asked to come and talk to you about risk. And so it shouldn't take very long. Of course, they're laughing at me because just here I am, a single person sitting on. I'm not a big guy to begin with. So anyway, so I said, look, I just only have a couple slides. I'll put a slide up, and I just had one question before I put the slide up. I said, I want you to think about it before you react to it. I'd like you to look at this picture and tell me if you see any hazards or risks associated with this job. And of course, they're chuckling. So I put that slide up, and it was the quietest place I'd ever been in a long time. It was like a church that day. Nobody spoke for about a minute. They just couldn't believe it. And if I showed this slide to another SAR tech, they'd said, oh yeah, that was a pretty good operation, wasn't it? So once it settled down, there were a couple of comments that were along the lines of, I mean, are you crazy that you would actually do something like this? And I said, well, no, the question was though, do you see any hazards or risks associated with it? And I said, the reason I asked that is because, and I apologize for not having been underground mines before, but this kind of work entails an organization of people inside that helicopter and other people like our ground crew back at our operations. And our work environment is dynamic. We never, ever know what it's going to be like. We have procedures and practices. We have training, we have equipment. We have experience, but When you get there is when you decide whether you're going to take this on or not. And I think it's important at this stage to mention that, you know, search and rescue, we do have a very short number of SARTECs, but we couldn't get the job done without the pilot, the two pilots in this particular helicopter, and the flight engineer, but all of the aircrew. We could never do the job because they're at the same risk we are. We just change the risk once we get out of that helicopter. And then we have the crew. The maintenance crew have access to these airplanes 24 hours a day. And they change all the compartments. They have wrenches in their hands. They make sure these bolts are tight, the fluids are up, it's serviceable, it's not going to break when you're in flight. Because as you had mentioned earlier, in these environments, you don't get a second chance to get it wrong. If anything happens to this particular rescue at that particular time, everybody in that airplane is going to be dead, likely. So it has a lot to do with organizations that you can trust each other explicitly. You never challenge anybody from a standpoint of, are they competent to do their job? So in this particular environment, what would happen is we would get there. We don't know about the organization on the ship at this stage, but we would then say, are we able to do this? Pilots, navigators, engineers, are you guys comfortable with this environment? Are you going to be able to hold that helicopter there while we're down there? And what are you going to do, and how much fuel do we have? Because we don't have air-to-air refueling. And if we thought that we had 3 hours left and we're a couple hundred kilometers out to sea and we can't make it back, it's not going to be a good day. So they'll make a decision. And if they make a decision, then we as SARTECs have to make a decision. Are we going to do this or not? Because if one of us is injured, is the other guy going to be able to save the other guy first? That our priorities change as to what we're going to do that day. And that's happened before, where you had to save each other. So in this particular situation, I wanted to ask these people in the theater, what would make you, how would you get through the decision to actually do this job? And here's the job. The job is that you are going to hoist one or two SARTECs down inside that ship. Now that ship is probably it's a cargo ship, container ship. It's probably about a 30,000 ton ship. It's somewhere around 150 to 200 meters long. It's in swells of somewhere around 80 feet to 100 feet high. That ship, that bridge, and the communications tower on top, the sonar tower, that would be at least 80 feet above deck. So that wave looks like it's going over the top. So that's probably an 80 or 100 foot swell. So you've got to time that so that when that 30,000 tons of ship rises and goes down in those swells, it has a trough of 40 to 60 feet. And you need to get on that ship when you're at the bottom of the wave or at the top of the wave. And you want to hope that at the same time, there's no wave going over top. So everybody's skilled. The decision's made. There's a couple of people down in the injury room that are critically injured. You need to get down there. And now you're in a different environment. It's a tough environment because you've got your wetsuits on. You don't have your sea legs. You're going to be heads down, treating people. And it's a great time to be sick. So you don't have a lot of time. And the helicopter doesn't have a lot of fuel. And if that weather changes, that crew may get killed. So people are making decisions every second, just constantly making decisions. What do we do now? What do we do now? What do we do? Because it's not only about you, it's about all your people that are there. That's kind of a rescue mission.
Yeah. So after this operation was completed, and you fly back.
Yep.
And you have the injured crew on board now. You fly them out.
We would take them to somewhere. To take them to the nearest hospital if we could get them there.
Yeah. You're constantly busy monitoring their health, and so you're very busy on the way back until you load them off, and then
very busy.
When you walk off and you leave the helicopter behind on the base, and you start walking away. The others that were with you, what do you talk about?
Well, we generally talked. We debrief. We go back and debrief when we're back. Because
after that.
Yeah, oh yeah. We have a lot of gear that we need to get off there and get straightened away.
So it doesn't stop. The work hasn't stopped.
No, the work doesn't stop. No.
But I want to hear when the work stops. You go out, you go to a pub, have a beer, do you sit down, do you chat? What do you do just after the thing stops?
What we do is we do have a debrief when we're back with the crew to make sure everybody's okay. How you doing? You know, mentally, physically. How did the mission go? What could have we done better? Are there any changes we can make? Modifications to the airplane? Those kinds of things are the things we talk about. If you could be time expired, depending on how many hours that you actually have worked, where you'd have to call another crew in, because these things run 24/7. So that's kind of where we sit around and talk. You're not supposed to have a beer or anything like that on board a base. That's not a registered pub or anything. Okay. Now I'm saying that because there are occasions.
So hold on to when you stop. But if you go home,
yeah,
you walk in the door,
yeah,
and I've met your lovely wife Sharon,
yeah,
and she says to you, "So how was your day at work today?"
Yeah.
What do you say?
Well, we just say, yeah, it was an interesting mission, but everybody was okay.
She obviously knew all the time that you've been exposed to extreme risk.
Yeah.
And you're coming home and she's relieved.
Yeah.
How do you, in your personal life, account for this? You and your wife personally, how did you account for this risk and this extreme exposures you had to deal with on a day-to-day basis almost?
It's a good question. We don't do it in a formal way, but we're very tight group. Search and rescue teams are very, very tight. Families are very tight. We all know each other. We know the kids and wives and stuff, because obviously our guys get killed or seriously injured, and it's our job to take care of everybody. That's our job. It's not to leave it to other people to manage. So
she had to learn to deal with this risk levels in your life in her own way.
All the time. And there are spouses that stay home. I would have to say everybody that I knew, they just sort of managed it. And, they're under a lot of stress. So in those days, we weren't calling home. We might go, you could be launched at 2:00 in the morning and not come home for a week, 2 weeks. Yeah. The base would phone them and tell them, yeah, they're gone, they're still away, and we'll keep you posted, but they're okay. That was the message. They're okay. Yeah.
So the day you retired, how long were you in doing this?
In this particular role, I was in 13 and a half years.
And what made you retire?
I loved it, but I just realized that I think I wanted to try to do something different in my life for a while.
Yeah. Last question. If you have to think back about that period of time, you've had a very distinguished career after that as a mining safety professional. We'll talk about that on a different occasion. Sure. I wanted to dedicate this episode to specifically this part of your life. Mm-hmm. If you look back at this period of your career, what is the single most important capacity, skill, strength that you got from that carried you forward in your career?
I wish it was probably an easy answer. I think what's happening is that you realize that you don't have any limitations. It doesn't matter how complicated, how tough things are, how arduous you think it is. If you set your sights on something, then you just really had to focus and stay focused. There were things that as we went through this training program, that every person on our course, we ended up graduating, I think 10 people, had learned this, that camaraderie and trust and teamwork and commitment were things that you just can't go and buy that stuff. It's there, but it's within you, and if you can recognize that you can take on anything, and in all likelihood you'll achieve it. That's probably the biggest things I've taken from it.
That's what I was wondering, because if you've been able to go to those extremes, anything after that appeared to be rather mundane, wouldn't it?
This is a challenge, and this is the challenge coming from these sort of high performance groups and high performance teams. What do you do after? The people that you're going to interact with on a regular basis would never had these experiences. And so sometimes it's difficult for some people not to be around high performing people. It was actually one of the goals I'd set for myself, which was think through this, like really actually commit to thinking, how can my skills and my abilities fit with society in a general terms and in with industry. So I really had to focus on being a lot more patient, which took me a long time, a little more tolerant of other people, and try not to be too demanding, because this is definitely an alpha male process. One of the things that they did open up, which was a good thing, there were no officers and no women allowed in the trade, but they did open it up for women, which was good.
Right.
So,
Mike, I know one of the things that you did after that is to play a key role in the mining industry's management of fatal risks. And I can't think of many people that would understand the management of fatal risk better than you, given the experiences that you've had to go through for 13 and a half years of your life. And you've made a massive contribution to the mining industry all around the world today through the ICMM. The mining industry is leading the world in serious injury, fatal and catastrophic risks. And I know that your contribution to that is immeasurable. And you have probably saved many, many more lives after that period in your life in the mining industry, because the mining industry became very, very competent in dealing with this. And we'll have another chat about that, because that's another topic that you and I share some experiences with. Thank you, Mike. This has been a privilege to me, for me to have you as a guest on my fireside chats. And I'm going to book you for another chat pretty soon. But thank you very much.
Oh, Corey, I'd like to thank you very much for this opportunity. And although we've known each other for a long time, we really didn't get a chance to work together for much up until the last couple of years. And then when you and I were on the EOF process for just about 2 years together, I'd have to say, regardless of all the experiences I ended up taking on board and learning and applying, I learned a lot from you and how you think and how you go about doing your business. So I try to emulate those as often as I possibly can. So I really appreciate you helping me to advance in my knowledge and my experience base as well.
Well, thank you very much for that, Mike. Makes me feel very humble.